Hello, I'm Sarah. This is Hardcover Hearts. And usually these are my week of reading wrap-ups where I talk about the books that I read this week, what I'm currently reading, and then potentially could read. But I'm so far behind that I'm doing catch-up still. So this will be some books that I've read recently that I haven't had a chance to talk about since. So let's get started. The first thing I want to say and talk about is a book that I just finished, which culminates an entire year project that I had with Elisabeth of Bookish North. And technically it's longer than a year because we started, maybe it's about a year and a half, we started with this book. This was Square Haunting, 5 Women, Freedom, and London Between the Wars by Franchesca Wade. This was in one of my year's best reading experiences. This book is outstanding. Really, Franchesca Wade really looks at one square that was in London and 5 different amazing women that overlapped and lived in the square, and some didn't even know each other, but just such a fertile ground in this one place for these 5 women in their lives. So this was a fantastic book, which inspired us to try to read Virginia Woolf, which she and I were both novices in. So we dipped our toes in A Room of One's Own. And then we also went and read her writer's diary. After that, we were like, okay, well now we think we're ready. And we wanted to read her fiction. And I think she and I were both trepidatious that we were going to find it really, really challenging. And a lot of times we really did, but not for the reasons we thought. This means that we are done. This is Between the Acts, her final fiction book. This was actually finished by her husband from drafts that she had left of the manuscript because she had died by suicide before this was completed, or published, I guess I should say. I'm not going to say too much about this other than to say that a lot of the same problems that I found earlier exist here as well. Casual racism. I did not find it coherent. And I think some of it, I wonder if some of it is because it's very specific to a time and there are references that I just don't understand as an American. I don't know if it would be true if I were British. This is set in over one day, and it's in a little village, and there's a play being put on, and the play is a look at British history and United Kingdom history. And some of it just, I didn't get the references, and it's all very poetic, and allusions are made to things, and if you're not grounded in that material, it means nothing to you, which was the case for me. I couldn't connect to the characters. I couldn't connect to the subject matter. You know, there's some beautiful. Look, Virginia Woolf does nature writing amazingly. So anytime there was a talk about the home that this play was being performed at, I was there for, but everything else just kind of went right over my head. I'm going to be doing Elisabeth and I are going to do hopefully a wrap up of our entire experience reading Virginia Woolf. So that'll probably happen kind of maybe closer to the summer. So stay tuned for that. But it feels incredibly good to have finished Proust and finished Woolf. And now I can kind of focus on some of my other projects that I have. So my other buddy reader that I adore reading with is Leo from A Little Book Life. And I had heard about this from Kazen of Always Doing. And Kazen put a video up, and that video was about, I forget the name of it, but I'll put a link to it below. But it was about like calm, good, cozy, feel-good reads during when times are really hairy. I'm completely paraphrasing that. That's not what the title was, but that's in essence what it was. And she had so many interesting books that I had either heard of but didn't really know enough about. But the way she talked about them and it teed them up I reached out to Leo because I think that maybe he wanted to read some of these with me. And sure enough, we created a little subset of those that we wanted to read. So we read A Psalm for the Wild Built. This is the first of the Kazen list that we decided we were going to jump into. This is by Becky Chambers, and it's the first of duology, and it's known as the Monk and Robot series. This book was it was so charming. It was so innovative. It was, had heart. It made me giggle. It made me sigh and stop and think. So this is a dystopian world where industrialization had taken place, so much so that robots really did most of the work for humans. And at a certain point, robots became sentient. And at this stage, they just said, you know what? Why are we doing all this work? So they decided not to do the work, walked off the job, held a general strike, and said, you know, we'd prefer not. I'd rather not. Kind of Bartleby the Scribner, and walked off the job. But they came to an agreement with the humans that no harm, no foul. We won't try to destroy each other. We were going to split up the world into our part and your part. And so the robots went into the wilderness and to not be seen from again. And the idea was there was not to be contact between the two, between humans and robots. And so out of that, we have many centuries later, and there's like an agrarian society that's been built up. And we meet Dex, and Dex is a non-binary character who is really struggling, like really trying to find their way in the world, really at an ends, decides that they want to become a tea monk. And they're going to train themselves. They don't want to go through more of an apprenticeship. They really want to kind of forge their own path. And a tea monk just sounded so delightful. It's a person that they travel with their wagon, and in this wagon, then they'll prop up in a town. They have a little table, and people come and tell them their woes, and they'll kind of make up some tea based on that'll help them feel better. They listen to them, kind of like a mix of a healthier bar situation with actually trying to make people feel better, not just forget their woes, right? And very charming, the assumptions that they made about what their abilities were to do this versus the reality of when they actually started to do it. So that was fantastic. They're obsessed with crickets, the sound of crickets, and decide that they want to start venturing and trying to explore more uncharted territory. And as they're doing this, out of the woods walks Mosscap. Mosscap is the first robot that has been seen by a human in ages. And so they have the first meeting, and it's charming, it's funny, it's delightful. The whole thing was just wonderful. They decide to go off together because there's a place that Dex wants to see, and Mosscap knows how to get there. So it's very slim, a very fast read, but I was really surprised at the depths that it held, and it completely charmed myself and Leo as well. We were both in love with it, and we're going to read volume 2 when it comes out. So thank you, Kazen, for such an amazing book recommendation. Then he and I continued our project that's going to take us a little longer to finish. This is our Anita Brookner project. I think this is number 18. This is Falling Slowly. We have 3 main characters in this. We have Miriam and her sister Beatrice and Max. Miriam and Beatrice, when we open, they live together. They're older women, and one has been married, the other has not. Miriam had a marriage, but it wasn't really successful. She just did it to kind of check the box and get it over with. But her husband was not someone that she wanted to live a life with. There were just a lot of complications. I mean, they just didn't really like each other very much. So he decides that he has an opportunity to take a job in Canada, and he leaves. And she does not follow. And it proceeds to move in with her sister. Her sister was a singer, kind of a lounge singer, and is kind of, her career is winding down as she's gotten older. Max was her agent, and he is also getting older, and he's decided that he's going to retire. And so he introduces Beatrice to the new young up-and-coming agent who will take care of her career from henceforward. Well, there is sparks between Miriam and this man. And we have very interesting kind of dynamics between these four characters. The first half of it was very typical. It's exactly where it was going to go. It's very much an Anita Brookner book, which all Anita Brookner books are pretty good. Some are exceptional. I would say the second half of it really felt like it opened up a little bit into new ways. There was a conversation that I felt Anita's been kind of circling the drain around, because she writes these characters that all talk about loneliness and isolation and sadness. And so it's about the sad old ladies. But here she goes a little bit deeper, and she starts to kind of hone in a little more. And it's not just loneliness. It's more about the isolation that comes from old age. It's about the horrors of getting old and finding not only is your life diminishing, but your body, what you're capable of is diminishing as well. And so the falling slowly is not about falling in love, falling slowly into this beautiful love. It's falling slowly to your grave. Just like, ooh, bleak. But it was beautifully done, and the ending was not as bleak as I expected it to be. And if you followed Leo and I as we talk about these books as we read them, he and I keep hoping that she's going to, like, as if this is like therapy sessions for her, right? This writing this same trope over and over and over again. We keep hoping that she's going to find a breakthrough, then the next book is going to be different. I don't know if that's... We may need to recognize that after 18 of these, that may not be the case. We only have 24 to read in total. So, but I liked this book. I thought this book was much better in the second half than the first. So I can understand if you would bail in the first half of this, but the second half was quite lovely. Then for March Mystery Madness, I also wanted to get back to a series that I love. So this is a historical fiction series. This is Sovereign by C.J. Sansom. This is so good. This is the Matthew Shardlake series. This is set in 1541. So it is the reign of King Henry VIII. We know that Matthew Shardlake has been, he was kind of introduced to us through Cromwell. He was involved with the dissolution of the churches and the monasteries. He is a lawyer who keeps getting pulled into things, and he wants nothing to do with this stuff. He wants to just live his simple life and not have to constantly be battling these political, very, very heightened, dramatic situations. And yet he keeps getting pulled in because he's really good. And it's such that he's usually having to deal with multiple taskmasters and deal with multiple assignments per each time that he's sent out. This is the third in the series, and in this one, we move the action to York. So Henry VIII is doing this big procession through the northern areas of England, and he's really demanding penance and fidelity, and so it's this big thing of this procession of royalty coming through these lands. And Matthew Shardlake has to be there with his trusty sidekick and helper, Jack Barrack, and they have to be there because he's a lawyer, so he has to hear the petitions. But while he's there, he has to do some secret work for the Archbishop Cranmer. This is a smart, well-researched, thoughtful, human, really wonderful mystery series that has so much more layered on top of it. So if any of that historical mystery sounds appealing to you, or the time frame sounds appealing to you, the Matthew Shardlake series is fantastic. Then another one for March Mystery Madness. This is an digital arc that I was given access to by the publisher. And this is The Woman and the Knife by Gu Byeong-Mo, and it was translated by Chi-Young Kim. Now, a quick moment about the naming conventions. So I really looked over and over again to see if the name of the translator should be different, if the order should be different, the family name first. But it's on the cover as Chi-Young Kim as opposed to Kim Chi-Young. So I'm going to honor that and keep it as is. This was very different. I was attracted to it because it's an old lady assassin. I was like, oh, well, that sounds quite interesting. And it didn't have it didn't give me the sense of a cozy, kind of comical type of vibe. So I was curious to see how that was going to be portrayed. And in this, we have a old woman assassin. She's 65 years old, and she's been doing this for a very, very long time. She's very good at it. She is isolated purposely. She lives her own life. She's very cautious. She has a dog called Deadweight. Her name is Hornclaw. There's no humanizing of her. That's her work name, and we don't really know anything else about her. She has fully embodied this assassin cover. And all the people that she interacts with also have their assigned code names, and that's the only way that she knows them as well. An assassination goes a little south, goes a little sideways, and she's very hurt. She shows up to one of the clinics that her agency uses, but instead of her regular doctor who understands all of the rules of engagement in working with these assassins and fixing them up, she is shown to a different doctor. He's young and doesn't really know what he's doing and is very shocked at the state that this woman is in, but keeps his mouth shut. And he's doing so because he's there for his own purposes, off hours. He's not supposed to be there, and so they can keep each other's secret. Obviously, her secret is much more dangerous than his secret, but that kind of creates this little opening in her to be curious about him and curious about his family, and starts to kind of humanize her just ever so slightly. This is a brutal book. It is very violent. It's very cold. But it's also really fast-paced. It's really wry, but the violence is there. And so if you're like me and you prefer not to read a lot of violence in your books, just know that it's there. And that, I think, is the one thing that really that made me not love it, was just the amount of violence. But it was twisty-turny. I think I was rooting for her more than I thought I would, or that I normally would for a character like this. It was I gave it a 3 because I liked it, but I didn't love it, and it was that in-your-face brutality that really kept me away from it. It felt very much like a movie. It felt very cinematic, and the pace was really, really fast. So if that's your jam, this might be a good book for you. And then the last book I want to talk about is I read this in my Kindle. And this was another from Kazen's list of cozy reads, books to enjoy during hard times. And this is All Systems Red, the MurderBot Diaries #1 by Martha Wells. Now, I was, I think I just made mention that I don't like violent books. And so MurderBot, I've heard so much about this from so many people. And I've always kind of stayed away from it because of that title. But I was convinced to take a chance, and Leo held my hand through the whole thing. This was such a great book. I'm sold. I went to the library. I have the other next 2 volumes ready to go. This is about a robot. Also, another really ornery, contrary robot. I'm really digging these robots and these kind of anti-capitalist sentiments that they have. This robot is, in essence, a contract robot that's kind of sent out with people, and it's being used for security currently with this research team that is on a planet and doing some research into the environment and looking for types of things. And it's very sparse. We don't get a lot of world building here at all. Most of it is character. Most of it is all about the characters and their engagement and their interactions. And but plot is very heavy here. So this robot is there, and the robot is just really funny, very antisocial, doesn't follow the protocols and things that they're supposed to do, hence the kind of Bartleby the Scrivener type of feel and vibe. They're supposed to be getting regular updates and actually updating their systems, and they just can't be bothered. And some of the reason that is because it would mess with their downloads that they've already done of all of the programming that they watch. And so they'll do it later, but they don't do it now. And that ends up being a very key aspect and key component in what happens from the plot. They find out that there's data that they were supposed to be given that they were not given, and something is hinky on this planet, and they're walking into things that they have no knowledge about, and that's turned out to be very dangerous. And our very reluctant, antisocial robot is forced into situations that allows them to leverage some of the things that they've learned from watching television and series, but at the same time puts them in a position that they never really wanted to be in. As I said, fantastic, absolutely fantastic, adored it. So I'm going to stop there for now. I still have more to update you on. Stay tuned and come back for my next video, and I'll tell you about some other books that I read recently that I really enjoyed. I'd love to know, have you read any of these? Are any of these on your radar, or will they be on your radar now that I've mentioned them? Thank you so much for watching, and I'll look forward to talking to you again soon. Bye.